Click the links for Odysee. Bit Chute. Join channel, become a member, or support the channel anonymously through crypto or on Coffee. I'm pretty sure with $1 billion, you can start up pretty much any video streaming, live streaming, and have it payment processors. That's the video side of social media. The second side is the like the Twitter Gab type of chat, which seems to me you set that up without video hosting to start with, and then you start allowing clips of like 20 megabytes, and that's what Gab has now. And Gab has editing and it's got like you can delay tweets and delete tweets, and it has a bunch of stuff that Twitter doesn't have. So I'm pretty sure that does not cost $1 billion to set that up. I don't know how much they have invested in stuff like Odysee, which is freaking awesome, or Bit Chute. I don't know what their startup cost for that was, but it didn't look like it was a whole bunch of money. So there's this, and then there's the recent Twitter bans. It turns out people are really desperate for alternative media. And if you're on the right wing, this is the time to jump into social media. I mean, creating content. YouTube, if you're on YouTube and you're doing like pure pop culture, like that Star Wars girl who's great, she does Star Wars, Star Trek type of stuff, but that's like pure pop culture. She won't go outside of that because she's, if you're on YouTube, you're making money from it. Don't do anything to screw that up. But even channels like Gary Nerdrotic or Mecha Random, occasionally they will go outside those parameters and start talking about the social issues that affect the tech issues or the pop culture issues, because they're so there. It's like so many elephants are in this pop culture room. You're talking about pop culture, and it's like, yeah, I can't help but notice it's all like propaganda levels, like 1970s Russia levels of propaganda. So the like Bit Chute is for kind of the far off stuff, the far out stuff, where Odysee appears to be. It's like a YouTube clone, but it also has all the content that YouTube used to have 10 years ago and more. It's got everything. So I kind of think Odysee is poised to be in the next YouTube. And if you told me 5 years ago, oh yeah, they're going to try to replace YouTube, you'd be like, okay, here's the thing. Right now, it's a $500 billion valued company, but it doesn't cost $500 billion to set up an alternative to YouTube, which is Odysee. I don't know what it costs to start that up, but it's running. It's somebody in these comments was complaining like, oh, you need to have like none of the alt platforms have like 4K uploads, 4K streaming, and interactive live streaming. Odysee and Rumble do have interactive live streaming, and they are monetized. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he's aware of that. 4K? No, they're not 4K. But for most people who are doing YouTube type shows, you don't need 4K. You don't even need 720. It's like, what is Comics Game Phantom Menace? It's like, could you do that in 480? Yeah, oh, absolutely you could. It's people talking. It's like 9 little talking heads. That doesn't need to be 1080 or it doesn't need to be any high definition. It's like that you're just using streaming costs. So this whole concept of like, yeah, they'll get to 4K eventually. You got to give them time. Anyway, so Trump Network teaming up with, I guess he's got Trump Truth or something, which is just normie cringe tier stuff. But there's a lot of normie cringe people who are into that kind of thing. He's going to team up with Rumble and the Twitter ban. The thing is, big tech is in a whole different position than it was like 5 years ago, even 2 years ago or a year ago. First, in terms of YouTube type platforms, Odysee is the best replacement right now. Bit Chute, Gab TV, Rumble are also good. DLive and Rumble have very good infrastructure, like tech infrastructure, but DLive's got a ton of censorship, and Rumble is available on the App Store, which means ultimately they're just not going to allow anything crazy edgy. Like maybe you can get away with it now, but eventually Apple and Google are going to say, hey, listen, if you want to continue to be accessed on the App Store, you gotta have political commissars in place. Where Gab TV and Odysee don't have that because you don't go through the App Store to get them. They're internet services. Though Odysee does have an app for Apple, but not for Android, which is kind of weird. So anyway, Odysee has everything working in place right now. It's live streaming and it's monetized. And it's the freest speech out there. So Twitter is a little bit different Because the government and mainstream media use it, but the platform bans people. So there's some constitutional issues going on there about, the open marketplace of ideas, public forums, and the concept of the First Amendment. If it doesn't apply to social media that the government is de facto using to disseminate information, then it really should have First Amendment protections. Otherwise, the First Amendment is meaningless. You have the concept of redress of grievance with your government, and your government's speaking. You also have the right to speak back to your government, and they're on Twitter. So you either have to make Twitter a free speech platform subject to constitutional protections, or have an alternative form available that they also clone their tweets on, like a Gab. They'd have to have set it up a Gab cloning or something like that. Because the platform bans people preferentially right of center. It's not a neutral forum. So anyway, so ultimately the right has got to leave Twitter and YouTube for alt tech. It doesn't matter what form the alt tech takes. If Trump wants to combine Rumble for monetized videos, live streaming chat, and use Trump Truth for the Twitter Gab app, that would work just fine. He raised $1 billion. That is more than enough to get tech off the ground. I mean, you've got sites like World Truth Videos, a video uploading site, and they have a chat app and posts and all these kind of things. It's POA.st. It doesn't look like they spent, more than $50,000 to get those video hosting sites online, and they work just fine. That's for edgy content that is even too edgy for Gab, which doesn't make sense because anything's allowed on Gab. Anyway, so Gab and Odysee work very well, and it looks like they cost a fraction of that. Though, like I said, they work very well. The tech is finally up to date. Tech has gotten so much cheaper now that there are things that are possible now that just weren't possible 2 years ago. Where replacing Twitter, that's difficult because of who's on it. But replacing YouTube, yeah, absolutely. If you're just on YouTube for cooking videos, okay, well, all those videos are probably cloned on Odysee right now anyway, because Odysee has a thing set up where you sign up, and if you have over 300 subs on YouTube, it will automatically clone your channel for Odysee. So it's everyone on YouTube is probably already on Odysee. You never have to leave the platform, which is a big thing for eyeball retention. Okay, so the Trump platform is probably going to parasitically take traffic from Twitter, Parler, and Getter, and maybe Minds. I don't know if anyone uses Minds anymore. And Parler and Getter, those are just a enormous stand type of content. So if those get dissolved, it's there's no loss there. They're still available through the Apple and Google App Store, so they got to abide by those terms of services. But Gab, Odysee, and Bit Chute, they're going to remain because they're the place. If you want edgy content, you want the brutal truth, you want everything on the table, everything available to be talked about, the only place you can do that is on Gab TV, Odysee, and Bit Chute. The right wing is already building this parallel economy. It's booming lately because you see that if you're on Gab, you see oh my gosh, there's ads on Gab. You go to Odysee and Bit Chute, it's oh, there's advertisements there. It's there's some no, you're not going to see Coca-Cola on one of these sites, but there are a lot of small businesses who view okay, I can get view click rates of a penny an ad, where Facebook is 10 cents an ad. It's so if you're advertising now, this is the time to get on these alt platforms. The thing is, $1 billion from Trump investors, that's a lot of money to build essentially a Gab and an Odysee. And Rumble is already up and running, so you're working with them to somehow incorporate your stuff on there. And it's it would have been better if you went to Gab. It's Andrew Torba's got a commitment to free expression. The platform's in place. Your base, a lot of your base is there, though a lot of the people on Gab are further to the right. And I get it. Rumble is kind of for the normies, but that's fine too. Anything to get people away from Twitter. No company is too big to fail. Especially YouTube. YouTube is even though YouTube's a much bigger market cap company than Twitter, Twitter is kind of ingrained because everyone who's in politics who has social media, almost, vast majority of them are using Twitter to disseminate their political information, where YouTube is different. It's It's mostly cat videos and makeup videos and unboxing videos. It's pretty attractive people doing things, and that's YouTube. It doesn't actually have a lot of political high value speech. There are alternatives to YouTube, where in terms of like constitutional questions, there's no alternative to Twitter, at least yet. Anyway, there's no future for you on YouTube and Twitter if you're on the right. It's time to definitely examine alternative platforms. I listen to more live streams on Odysee now than I do on YouTube, because the stuff on YouTube, it's just missing that edge that old YouTube had. And even like 5 years ago, YouTube was fun. But there was a live stream with like Spencer, Andy Worski, Sargon, and a bunch of other people. And like half those guys are kicked off YouTube now. The only one remaining is Sargon, because he's been so careful. And he got kicked off of PayPal and Patreon, I think, because he dropped an N-bomb. It's like, I want to go to a platform where you don't get kicked off for dropping the occasional N-bomb. Especially as he used it. I don't mean to imply he used it in a derogatory sense. He was calling people who are not black, who would have found that term offensive. He says, you're behaving like the thing you claim to hate. And he strawmans a lot too, but it's like, everyone should have the free expression, so you can offer a rebuttal to these strawman arguments. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next episode.